My fiancée ran away on the night before our wedding, and she ran away with the men she loved. She left a letter at home. She wrote that she had had enough of her family's oppression and that she was going to pursue her own happiness. Heartbroken, I told her parents that I was willing to dissolve our engagement so she could be with the men she loved. Her parents were overwhelmed with shame, and everyone else praised my generosity. What they didn't know was that my fiancée's elopement was entirely within my control. Not only did I not stop them, I secretly sent people to erase all traces of their departure, making sure no one would ever find them again. Chapter 1. The fiancée eloped. My fiancée, Rosie Sue, eloped with the men she loved. The news that I had been dumped quickly shot to the top of INS trending searches. Rosie and that other man, the homewrecker, were exaggerated and sensationalized until everyone knew about it. For a time, people congratulated me on my official debut as a clown, turning me into a grand joke in the mouths of netizens. Because of this, Mr. and Mrs. Sue, already advanced in age, had to shamelessly come to my house to apologize to my parents. It's our failure as parents. We disgraced your family. Although my parents were furious, considering our families had been close for generations, and that they truly knew nothing about Rosie Sue's elopement, they could only swallow their anger and let the matter pass. Though I felt wronged, I put on a sorrowful expression and said that I was willing to break off the engagement with Rosie and set her free. After that, I didn't go to the company for several days, hiding at home to nurse the wounds of being dumped. Only inside my own bedroom did I curl my lips into a triumphant smile. Rosie, oh Rosie, once you've left, don't even think about coming back. Rosie and I were childhood sweethearts. I had once heard that feelings between childhood sweethearts could never compete with a destined newcomer. I had always scoffed at that. How could years of growing up together lose to someone met only briefly? But Ambrose's appearance shattered my understanding. Maybe it was because he was an intern at the Sue Corporation. Proximity breeds opportunity. Maybe it was because he was different from us second-generation rich kids. In short, as the unexpected outsider, he managed to capture Rosie's heart in just half a year. But the Sue family was one of the most prominent families in South City. They would never allow a penniless nobody like Ambrose to marry into the family. Not to mention, Rosie Sue and I were already engaged. She argued and protested, but the Sue family remained unmoved. As the wedding date approached, Rosie resorted to a desperate measure, abandoning everything in the Sue family and planning to flee the marriage. I had originally intended to stop her, but some time ago, a flood of plotlines suddenly surfaced in my mind. About me, Rosie, and Ambrose. The world we live in is a romance novel. Rosie is the female lead. I, the legitimate fiancé, am merely the male supporting role, and an especially tragic one at that. Ambrose, the interloper, is actually the male lead. In the original story, I forcibly brought Rosie back home. Ambrose thought she had regretted her decision and left alone. Knowing she couldn't escape, Rosie pretended to submit and married me, but she secretly resented me all along. She hated me for separating her from her lover, hated me for tainting their pure love. So on the surface, she played the role of a gentle, virtuous wife, caring and attentive to me in every way. In reality, she had been stealing confidential information from my company. Gradually, our company received fewer and fewer projects. Newly designed products were always released first by our competitors. The company's stock price plummeted. Then she bribed the company's finance director, having him embezzle all the liquid funds on the books, delivering me a fatal blow. After the company went bankrupt, Rosie finally revealed her true face. She sent my parents to a psychiatric hospital and locked me in a basement, taking pleasure in humiliating me every day. Ha ha ha. This feels amazing. Mason, when you drove Ambrose away, did you ever imagine you'd end up like this? Rosie laid out photo after photo in front of me, pictures of my parents being tortured in the psychiatric hospital. My eyes bloodshot. I gritted my teeth. Rosie, if you have grievances, come at me. Don't lay a hand on my parents. She wagged her index finger, smiling smugly at my wretched state. Does it hurt? When you separated Ambrose and me back then, my heart hurt 100 times more than yours does now. She tormented me until I was neither fully human nor ghost for 5 years. When she finally traveled the world and found Ambrose, she forced a can of pesticide down my throat, making me close my eyes in unwilling death. But that still wasn't the end. To take revenge on me, Ambrose fed my ashes to dogs. He even played the surveillance footage of my torture and cremation over and over in front of my parents. Casually, he added another cruel blow. What a pity. You didn't even get to see your son one last time. If killing the body is brutal, killing the heart is far worse. My parents couldn't withstand the blow. When no one was watching, they jumped off a building together. Chapter 2. A ridiculously stupid plot. What a ridiculously stupid plot for a novel. Setting aside the fact that I don't like forcing people against their will, in the later part of the story, my company's confidential information was stolen. It wasn't until Rosie smugly flaunted it in front of me that I suddenly realized, oh, So that's why my company has been so unlucky lately. It was you. How could something like that even happen? I was raised from childhood as the heir of the law family. How could I possibly be that stupid? I felt as if my intelligence had been insulted. At first, I thought these bizarre plot lines appearing in my head were just the result of overwork, my brain randomly fabricating dramatic scenarios. But when the events began unfolding one by one exactly as they had in my mind, I had no choice but to raise my guard to the highest level. Better to believe it exists than risk dismissing it. Compared to regretting things afterward, I prefer striking first. I began having people closely monitor Rosie's every move. Ambrose officially entered the Sue Corporation as an intern. Ambrose was bullied by senior employees and buried under a mountain of work. As he stayed late to finish everything, he caught the attention of Rosie, who was also working overtime. Ambrose's sunny, resilient, self-reliant, soft boy persona, the kind that looks harmless but tugs at your heart, made Rosie gradually fall for him. Ambrose visited his deceased parents' graves and fainted in tears before the tombstone, where Rosie happened to find him. From then on, the two slowly opened up to each other. After Rosie endured a grueling business drinking session, Ambrose took her to the riverside to watch fireworks. They shared a romantic kiss and officially began their relationship. Every single step was under my control, and every single detail matched the plot in my head perfectly. So when Rosie planned her elopement, not only did I refrain from stopping her, I even cleared the path for them, making their escape smoother. I also had people erase all traces of their departure, ensuring that the Sue family would never find them. If it hadn't been for me, the two of them probably would have been dragged back by the Sue family's bodyguards within days. A generous fiancé like me, there's only one in the entire world. I don't need their tearful gratitude. As long as Rosie and Ambrose stay tightly bound to each other for the rest of their lives and never come back to ruin mine again, that will be the greatest thanks of all. Chapter 3: The Cold War. My people continued to keep Rosie and Ambrose under strict surveillance. Reports about them were delivered to me on time every single day. After leaving the Sue family, Rosie and Ambrose bought a seaside villa in South City and lived sweetly together. But in less than 2 months, the two of them had no choice but to go out and find work. Naturally, when Rosie left, she had only taken her personal savings. Not long after, the Sue family froze her bank cards. Rosie had grown up pampered in the palm of her family's hand. Whatever she wanted, she got. Everything she ate and used was the very best. A spoiled heiress like her had long been accustomed to spending lavishly. Now that she had no income, if they wanted to survive, they had to earn money. Ambrose was doing relatively fine. He quickly found a clerical job at a private company. Rosie, however, had a much harder time. As the Sue family's heir, she naturally looked down on jobs that paid only $3,000 or $4,000 a month and required her to bow and scrape to others. Every position she applied for was something like general manager, but the moment employers saw her age and work experience, they shook their heads and rejected her. She wasn't even given a second interview. For a time, Rosie believed the HR staff were jealous of her talent and lacked vision. In truth, she had wronged them. Rosie's abilities were merely average. If she hadn't been born into a powerful family, forget inheriting her father's position, she probably wouldn't even have made it through the doors of the Sue Corporation. Separated from her family, Rosie, ambitious but incapable, simply couldn't secure a good job. Meanwhile, Ambrose's waiter salary was, at best, enough to keep the two of them from starving. To make their lives slightly more comfortable, Rosie eventually took a job as a cafe waitress. Everyone knows that being a server comes with poor conditions. Low pay, no benefits, deadly boring when idle, overwhelmingly exhausting when busy. I wonder if, at this moment, Rosie has started regretting her choices. 3 months later, Rosie and Ambrose finally had their first major argument since getting together. Because Ambrose had caught the attention of his boss's precious daughter, the young heiress was stunned the moment she saw him. She immediately launched an intense pursuit. In truth, Ambrose never responded to her advances. It was entirely one-sided. He even kept his distance from her, so Rosie had known nothing about it. Until that day, Rosie got off work early and went to pick up Ambrose, planning to surprise him, and she just happened to witness the heiress circling around him attentively. Ambrose, meanwhile, gave the girl a polite, perfunctory smile. Ignoring the setting, Rosie erupted in anger and accused Ambrose. It's only been 3 months and you've already fallen for another woman. Is it because I don't have money anymore? Because I'm no longer a rich heiress? How long have you two been sneaking around behind my back? Were all those vows you made to me just lies? Before Ambrose could even respond, the heiress immediately snapped back, fiercely protective. Wow, you're so aggressive. That's hilarious. Look at you, your entire outfit probably doesn't even add up to a few $100 with that shrewish attitude. What kind of heiress could you possibly be? Anyone with a brain would know he'd choose me over you. Furious, Rosie turned and stormed off, ignoring the heiress's attempts to stop him. Ambrose chased after her, But no matter how much he explained, Rosie refused to believe that nothing had happened between them. Or perhaps she did know the truth, but as Miss Sue, her pride had been utterly crushed by that other heiress, and she simply couldn't accept it. With Rosie Sue choosing avoidance and negativity over facing the issue, the two of them entered a cold war. Chapter 4: The Real and the Fake Heiress. After Rosie ran away from the wedding, Mrs. Sue cried all day long, cursing her unfilial daughter through tears. President Sue could only sigh repeatedly, investigating Rosie's whereabouts day after day. I knew that whether they were angry at Rosie for disregarding the bigger picture and eloping, or heartbroken at being abandoned by their daughter, once Rosie returned in the future, they would still forgive everything she had done today. Mrs. Sue even began visiting my house from time to time, subtly probing my family's attitude. Between the lines, she was clearly hoping that once Rosie came back, the marriage could continue. I couldn't help but sneer. I once did have some feelings for Rosie, but ever since I learned what she would do to my family in the original plot, any affection I had was personally strangled by her own hands. The only reason I hadn't made a move against the Sue Corporation was because, after my family fell into trouble in the plot, President Sue had helped the Law family several times, and because the couple had known nothing about Rosie's later actions. Otherwise, the Sue family wouldn't have survived until now. But looking at the current situation, I needed to cut off the Sue family's emotional attachment to Rosie as soon as possible, letting Rosie taste hope, only to plunge into despair again. Just thinking about it was delightful. The person I had been searching for finally appeared. I immediately set off for a small restaurant in the south. Nova was working there as a waitress. When I arrived, she was being harassed by a difficult customer. There was a bright red handprint on her face. The owner stood nearby, bowing and apologizing. Even so, the men kept spewing insults non-stop. The young girl's expression was calm, as though she had long grown used to such treatment. The same age, yet Rosie had abandoned a life of luxury for love, while this girl endured unreasonable humiliation just to survive. The contrast was striking. I stepped forward and helped her resolve the situation. Nova froze for a moment. Gratitude flickered in her eyes, but even more so confusion and vigilance. Good. That was exactly what I needed. If she had been the kind of naive woman who lost her bearings over a small act of kindness, all my effort would have been wasted. The reason I had spent so much time searching for Nova was simple. She was the true daughter of the Sue family. Back when Mrs. Sue was giving birth, the Sue family's nanny's younger sister had also gone into labor at the same time. Possessed by greed, the nanny had taken her sister to the very same hospital as Mrs. Sue. Both babies were girls, so she seized an opportunity to switch the two children. Afterward, the nanny's sister left with the real Sue heiress, while President Sue and Mrs. Sue cherished the counterfeit like a precious jewel. In the original storyline, after I, the vicious male supporting role, was written out, the conflict that followed was between Nova, who learned the truth, and Rosie. Unfortunately, Nova had grown up as an adopted daughter in a family that favored sons over daughters. She had no resources, no support. Naturally, she couldn't compete with Rosie. By then, the Sue couple had already stepped down from power and retired abroad, completely unaware that their real daughter was wandering outside. As a result, Nova not only lost, she disappeared without even leaving behind a body. What I needed to do now was simple. Send Nova back to the Sue family, and make sure Rosie, the fake heiress, no longer had a place in the Sue household. Chapter 5: She's Back. Rosie returned to the Sue family. In order to obtain her parents' forgiveness, she knelt at the gates of the Sue residence for an entire day and night after coming back. It wasn't until a torrential rain poured down in the evening, and Mrs. Sue's maternal heart could no longer bear it, that she allowed Rosie to enter the house. From then on, the Sue family seemed to return to the harmonious state they had before Rosie's elopement. They even held a banquet for her. On the one hand, the banquet was meant to dispel the bad luck of her return. Unfortunately, thanks to my earlier deliberate publicity, Rosie's runaway wedding had already become a laughingstock among the upper class. Many of the guests who attended came out of respect for the Sue family name. Many others came purely to watch the drama unfold. On the other hand, the banquet was also meant to reopen discussions with my family about resuming the marriage. Before this, I had already spoken with my parents and made it clear that I no longer wished to form a marital alliance with the Sue family. Therefore, when President Sue kept dropping hints both openly and subtly, my father skillfully deflected every attempt, expertly practicing verbal tai chi, circling around the topic without ever engaging. My mother, meanwhile, pulled Mrs. Sue aside and enthusiastically discussed the latest jewelry collections. Neither of them paid any attention to Rosie's deliberate attempts to show goodwill. As for me, I simply ate and drank unless it was absolutely necessary for me to speak. I remained a qualified professional diner. Rosie was deeply disappointed. I sneered inwardly. In the original plot, Rosie swallowed up the Law Corporation to avenge Ambrose, then destroyed my entire family. Their love story was portrayed as epic and tragic, yet it stood upon the blood of the three of us. I had thought their love was the kind that would endure until the mountains flattened and the heavens united before they would part. Now, it seemed it was nothing more than that. In fact, I hadn't even done anything. I had simply allowed events to unfold naturally. And the result? Ambrose entangled with his boss's daughter, and Rosie returned home in humiliation. What a disappointment. So much for love stronger than gold. So much for invincible true love. Before the messy wreckage of reality, it was utterly defeated, and at that very moment, Nova stormed into the Sioux residence, declaring that she was the true Sioux heiress, no matter how unwilling President Sioux and Mrs. Sioux were to believe it. When they saw that Nova's face bore a 70% resemblance to Mrs. Sioux's, they could not help but waver. After apologizing to the guests at the banquet, they immediately took Nova and Rosie to the hospital for a DNA test. When the results came out, they finally believed completely that Nova was their biological daughter. Mrs. Sioux held the frail Nova and wept bitterly. Rosie stood nearby, her face drained of color, utterly at a loss. There had already been many people at the banquet that day. Combined with my deliberate spread of information, the news that Rosie was a fake heiress became known to everyone. Following my guidance, Nova expressed her gratitude to me sincerely. I owe today to Mr. Law. I wonder if there is anything you would like me to do. A clever girl indeed, I said meaningfully. Rosie won't accept this quietly. If you want to sit securely as the Sioux family's eldest daughter, it won't be easy. Nova nodded thoughtfully. I understand. Thank you for your advice, Mr. Law. I gave her my private phone number and added, you haven't been back in the Sioux family long. If you need anything, you can call me. Chapter 6 Expanding the Empire. I truly couldn't understand how the Sioux couple's minds worked. If it were me, and someone had maliciously swapped my child at birth, I would absolutely sue the family that did it, and I would throw that counterfeit product out of my house without hesitation. But the Sioux couple's thinking was bizarre. After listening to Rosie's tearful pleas, not only did they refrain from suing the nanny and her sister, they even allowed Rosie to remain in the Sioux household as a young lady. It was hard to evaluate. Even a saint wouldn't go that far, would they? Originally, I had thought that once Rosie was expelled from the Sioux family, with her abilities she would only manage an ordinary life at best. For someone who had once lived above others, that would be more painful than death. Instead, the Sioux family's absurd decision disrupted my plan. This woman was harder to eliminate than I expected. But next, Rosie probably wouldn't have the energy to entangle herself with me. Her focus would be entirely on driving Nova out. To keep this chess piece from becoming useless, I had no choice but to secretly provide Nova with assistance. After handling that, I turned my attention to my own work. In the original plot, the reason I was so easily destroyed by Rosie boiled down to one thing. I was too weak. Even if Rosie was currently suppressed and unable to stir up trouble, the existence of one Rosie meant there could be a second or a third. I had to vigorously expand my career and enlarge the Law Corporation's territory. Thus, Law Corporation partnered with collaborators to develop a commercial center project in North City. The complex would include a large shopping mall, a trendy street food pedestrian avenue, cinemas, and various entertainment venues. The investment exceeded $4 billion. In addition, Law Corporation successively secured several other major projects. Once these were completed, the company would rise to an entirely new level. For this, I practically moved into the office, working non-stop every day. Only after the projects reached a successful milestone did I finally allow myself to breathe. At that very moment, Rosie was downstairs demanding to see me. The security guards, aware of her identity, didn't dare let her up, but also didn't dare hurt her. They could only half-heartedly block her path. I rubbed my temples and instructed, let her come up. The moment Rosie entered my office, she burst into tearful complaints. Mason, these days have been so hard for me. You used to cherish me the most when we were young. Please help me. Okay. I examined her carefully. Her hair was slightly disheveled. Her skin had lost its glow. Fatigue clouded her eyes. It seemed she had been having a thoroughly miserable time. And if Rosie was miserable, then I was delighted. The thought made me laugh aloud. Rosie, who had been sobbing, froze. Mason, what are you laughing at? I smiled at her gently. I'm laughing because seeing you is wonderful. Rosie assumed I still had lingering feelings for her and blushed shyly. But soon, she grabbed my sleeve pitifully. Mason, after everything that's happened, I've realized the one I love most is you. Let's get married. Okay. I lifted her chin lightly, my tone filled with disdain. Rosie, do you love me, or do you love the fact that I am the heir to the Law family? Chapter 7 The Counterfeit Miss arrives. Although I've been busy lately, I've still kept track of what's happening in the Sioux family. Nova, no. She changed her name after returning to the Sioux household. She now goes by Jane Sioux. Jane had excellent grades in middle school, but her adoptive mother absolutely refused to spend tuition money on what she called a useless girl. After completing the 9 years of compulsory education, Jane was forced to drop out. Her adoptive mother pushed her to work and earn money. Jane had no choice but to obey. Yet even while working, she never gave up on her dream of continuing her education. Whenever she had spare time, she would take out second-hand high school textbooks she had scavenged and study on her own. Now that she had returned to the Sue family, she immediately asked President Sue and Mrs. Sue to hire multiple private tutors for her. Jane was intelligent to begin with. Combined with her relentless hunger to learn and exclusive one-on-one tutoring, her improvement was remarkable. As for Rosie, she was busy every day as well. While Jane memorized vocabulary, Rosie flattered President Sue and Mrs. Sue, attempting to push Jane out of their hearts. While Jane worked through math problems, Rosie attended banquets hosted by other rich second-generation heirs, networking and maintaining connections. While Jane completed mock college entrance exam papers, Rosie clung to President Sue, acting spoiled and pleading to re-enter the Sue Corporation. But this time, President Sue was cautious and did not readily agree to his adopted daughter's request. Jane, meanwhile, would appear at just the right moments, quietly showing her parents the scars left behind by abuse from her adoptive mother. She would simply smile and reassure them that she was fine, that the past was in the past. Her calm, undramatic temperament only deepened the Sue couple's guilt. With subtle precision, Jane gradually pulled her parents' hearts back from the adopted daughter and toward herself. Jane's presence made Rosie anxious. She feared being overshadowed. She feared losing her place in the Sue family. She feared returning to that shabby rental apartment that had originally been hers. But the more panicked a person becomes, the more mistakes they make. According to the updates Jane sent me, President Sue and Mrs. Sue were no longer doting on Rosie as they once had. Finally, cornered and desperate, Rosie came looking for me. I released her chin, took out a tissue to wipe my hand, and then tossed the used tissue onto her face. Rosie, you want to marry me? Do you even qualify? If I were to form a marriage alliance with the Sue family, I should marry the real Sue heiress. Miss Jane, what exactly are you supposed to be? Rosie's eyes widened in disbelief as she stared at me. She probably never expected such cutting words to come from my mouth, but in the original storyline, the insults she hurled at me were 1,000 times crueler than what I had just said. Rosie shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Mason, you've been bewitched by that pretty boy fraud too, haven't you? You used to cherish me the most. How could you bear to speak to me like this? She looked at me hopefully, her eyes filled with expectation. Ah, how unfortunate for her. I had no intention of continuing this meaningless exchange. Adjusting my posture, I rested my chin on my hands and smiled at her. Miss Counterfeit, I think you're far more suited to the Chan family's young master. A match made in heaven. Really, why not go marry him? Sure, your background is a bit lacking, but you still have the Sue family as a facade. I'd even be willing to play matchmaker for you. No. Rosie shot to her feet. Her face was filled with panic and terror. Before I could say anything further, she turned pale and fled in a fluster. Sigh, why run? The Chan family's young master might be an illegitimate son, and a pervert with certain, unusual tastes, but even so, his status is still superior to that of a counterfeit like her. He's more than suitable. My inner matchmaker's heart shattered into pieces, beyond repair. Chapter 8 dragged onto the trending list. Rosie, of course, wasn't about to let things go. She began playing the victim online. Every day, she posted long, sentimental essays on INS, pouring out her inner sorrow. For example, I didn't know how to cherish him before. I lost the one I loved most. Now that I've returned, it's only right that he doesn't forgive me. It's all my fault. The sky waits for the rain, and I wait for him. If only he's willing to turn back, he'll see I've been standing behind him all along. In the dead of night, I dream of our childhood again. I climbed a tree to pick apples, too scared to come down. You said you would catch me. When I jumped, you did. But now, where are you? I wouldn't even have known if Jane hadn't sent me the link. I was speechless. Write your melodrama if you must, but did she really have to drag song lyrics into it? As a fan of the original singer, I felt personally offended enough to lose my appetite for the day. Plenty of netizens were moved by her melancholic essays. Every day, the comment section was filled with things like, "Beauty, you're too pitiful. Let go of that scumbag." And just like that, while I was sitting peacefully in my office, the blame came flying in from the internet. Still, I didn't interfere. Let the bullets fly for a while. The higher she stands now, the harder she'll fall later, and the more satisfied I'll be. So I instructed Jane to intensify her efforts within the Sue household and accelerate the process of pushing Rosie out. Sure enough, Rosie panicked. Her essays became more explicit each time. She forcefully molded me into the image of a heartless man who broke off an engagement. As for the things she herself had done, not a single word mentioned. Now, the internet was buzzing with speculation about who the mysterious he in her essays might be. No matter how much people asked, Rosie never explicitly named me, but between the lines, she revealed plenty of personal details about me. For instance, he was 25 years old and the president of a publicly listed company in South City. South City might be large, but there was only one man who fit those criteria. Thanks to the sharp eyes of netizens, I was swiftly identified. I didn't even have a personal account, so people flooded the official Law Corporation account instead. Scumbag. She's such a good girl and you broke off the engagement. Have you no shame? Trashman. I'll never buy a single product from your company again. Just wait for bankruptcy. What's the point of being handsome? Your heart is darker than a sewer. The PR manager was overwhelmed. There were simply too many comments to delete. He came to seek my instructions, asking whether we should hold a press conference to clarify the situation. A press conference? For this? Was Rosie worth that? I waved my hand dismissively. A bunch of keyboard warriors who just follow the wind. No need to make a spectacle of it. They sound righteous online, but how many would actually stop buying our products? Besides, not everyone on the internet lacks a brain. After all, when Miss Sue ran away from her wedding, I had made sure the entire upper class knew about it, even though a year had passed and no one brought it up anymore. Not mentioning something doesn't mean forgetting it. I was certain that somewhere, some enthusiastic bystander was already piecing together the timeline and restoring my innocence. But Rosie clearly lacked that awareness. The situation grew bigger and bigger. Out of 10 trending topics, 3 were related to me. More and more idle netizens even began loitering outside Law Corporation's headquarters. Rosie called me triumphantly to gloat. Mason, not so pleasant being a rat everyone wants to beat, is it? As long as you marry me, I'll step forward and clarify everything. A win-win situation. What do you say? I let out an undisguised laugh of contempt. Rosie snapped angrily. What are you laughing at? I replied lightly. I'm laughing at you. Even when begging, you don't have the proper attitude. You're the one being crushed by Jane right now. You're the one who needs a backer. Yet you're speaking to me in that arrogant tone, and you still want to marry me. Do you even remember what the truth is? Rosie was left speechless, her breathing loud and ragged on the other end of the phone, but she quickly regained her composure. That's right. You and I both know the truth, but the public only believes what they want to believe. Does the truth even matter? I had no desire to waste another second on her nonsense. I twirled the pen in my hand and lazily uttered a single word. Get lost. Chapter 9. Another move. The scumbag scandal reached its peak. Then someone dug up the old incident where I had once said I had officially debuted as a clown. Overnight, public opinion flipped. Just yesterday, the internet had been siding with Rosie. Now, the tide had turned entirely in my favor. For every person who had cursed me as a scumbag before, there were now even more people calling Rosie a hopeless love-brained fool. All the funeral wreaths and paper burial clothes that had been mailed to me were redirected by courier straight to the Sue residence. The internet is a double-edged sword. Used well, it can cut down an enemy without drawing blood, but it can just as easily backfire. Rosie probably hadn't expected netizens to have such long memories. She clearly underestimated the investigative prowess of the so-called Chaoyang masses, the sharpest watchdogs among online communities. They can dig criminals out of rat holes. Her gossip scandals were child's play by comparison. The boomerang she once aimed at me finally came back and struck her instead. The Sue Corporation's stock price dropped by 1 point. Their official account, just like Law Corporation's days earlier, was flooded by keyboard warriors and scolded mercilessly. Some troublemakers even camped outside the Sue residence, throwing rotten eggs and spoiled vegetables at anyone who stepped out. President Sue was furious. Mrs. Sue, who had always doted on Rosie, finally turned cold and reprimanded her. Yet Rosie stubbornly defended herself. I was pursuing my own love. What did I do wrong? Jane told me she was stunned by Rosie's shamelessness. She even said she had overestimated Rosie's intelligence, that at this rate, Rosie might self-destruct her way out of the Sue family without any help. I reminded Jane, don't lower your guard until an enemy is completely eliminated. There's always a chance of a counterattack. After all, in the original storyline, Rosie had destroyed both of us. With the protagonist's halo surrounding her, who knew what might happen next? Hearing this, Jane steadied her mindset and prepared herself. Just as I expected, Rosie made her move. She proposed to President Sue that Jane temporarily assume the position of CEO of the Sue Corporation. Jane is so intelligent, we can publicly announce to the media that she's a rare business prodigy. With her leading Sue Corporation, we're bound to reach new heights. All those years of schooling hadn't been wasted on Rosie. This move was brilliant. It shifted public attention away from her scandals and onto Jane, diluting the negative impact she had caused. At the same time, it would set Jane, who had no management experience, up for a spectacular fall, disappointing President Sue, Mrs. Sue, and the company's shareholders. If Jane made even the slightest mistake while serving as CEO, Rosie would undoubtedly magnify it infinitely and reap the benefits. A classic two birds with one stone strategy. And even if Jane refused, Rosie could still label her as unfilial, unwilling to shoulder responsibility for her parents. No matter what choice Jane made, it was a trap. President Sue hesitated. He knew Jane had only just returned and lacked the capability to step into Sue Corporation at this stage. But Jane agreed. It was a bold gamble. If she won, she would secure her footing within Sue Corporation. When she told me about it, though exhaustion showed on her face, her voice brimmed with confidence. While studying my high school curriculum, I also asked my tutors to teach me economics and management, and with the special assistant father assigned to me, I believe I can get through this. Looking into her eyes, bright as though filled with starlight, the word naive stuck in my throat. Forget it. After all, I was the one who brought her back. At worst, I'll simply protect her a little more. Chapter 10 Reaping What She Sowed. After Jane took over Sue Corporation, she became so busy she barely had time to eat. She used to report to me daily about what was happening within the Sue household. Now, however, every conversation lasted only a few minutes before being interrupted by business matters. I knew Rosie had started making moves behind the scenes. Those frequent banquets with second-generation heirs hadn't been for nothing. In our circle, people value interest over sentiment. When Rosie revealed her intention to undermine Jane, she did manage to rally a few allies. Of course, the truly intelligent ones were still watching from the shadows. The ones she gathered were nothing but fools. Those clowns repeatedly tried to trip up Sue Corporation. Jane resolved their interference with ease. Meanwhile, I quietly shielded Sue Corporation from behind the curtain. Those who can run companies are rarely simple-minded. Once they noticed my involvement, the firm still sitting on the fence understood my stance. They realized I stood with Jane. Instead of targeting Sue Corporation, they approached with cooperation proposals. Within a short time, Sue Corporation secured several major partnerships and its reputation soared. To celebrate, Jane hosted a victory banquet, inviting every major corporate leader in South City. Jane and I met again at the event. "How have you been lately?" I asked. Jane smiled. The confusion she once carried was gone, replaced by calm composure. "Busy, fulfilled. I finally feel like I'm living with purpose." Men or woman, once a person finds their life's direction, their existence is no longer in vain. I raised my glass. "Then let me congratulate you in advance." Jane clinked glasses with me. "Thank you." Afterward, she returned to networking with guests. I quietly stepped onto the balcony, gazing at the moon suspended high above. Unfortunately, there was a faint trace of crimson upon it, but it didn't matter. Soon, everything would be fine. Ah! Gasps and screams rippled through the banquet hall. The show had begun. I slowly swallowed the red wine in my mouth before making my unhurried return. On the stage in the banquet hall, a shocking scene was playing on the large screen. The crowd stood stunned, their sense of morality shattered. "Isn't that the Chan family's young master? I heard he plays dirty, but I didn't think it was true. TSK, an illegitimate son. After all, no class. And he dares show this here? Wait, who's that woman? She looks familiar." As if responding to the whispers, the Chan family's young master turned her face directly toward the camera. "Ah, it's Rosie. No way, it really is her. Well, the illegitimate son and the fake heiress getting together. Kind of fitting, isn't it?" Subconsciously, the crowd's eyes shifted toward Jane. Jane showed a look of shock and embarrassment. After apologizing to the guests, she hurried upstairs toward the guest rooms. I gently swirled the wine in my glass, joy blooming quietly in my chest. Rosie, oh Rosie. With this, her reputation was finished. In truth, the intended female lead of this little spectacle had originally been Jane. When Rosie realized Jane hadn't fallen into her trap and had instead established authority within Sue Corporation, she was furious. So she devised another scheme. She contacted the Chan family's young master, who had no particular preference for gender, and personally scripted this scenario. Unfortunately for her, I caught wind of it. With a few adjustments on my end, the starring role shifted. And so, the scene unfolding before everyone now featured Rosie instead. Chapter 11 The Final Ending. When President Sue learned about the farce at the banquet, he was so furious he nearly collapsed on the spot. The Chan family had lost face as well. They insisted that Rosie had deliberately seduced the Chan family's young master and stormed over to demand an explanation. President Sue refused to back down, bringing along a tearful Rosie. He confronted the Chan family head-on. Neither side yielded. The argument escalated into chaos. In short, utter mess. Later, Jane proposed a solution beneficial to all parties. Marry Rosie to the Chan family's young master. After this incident, both Rosie and the young master's reputations were in ruins. Neither would find a respectable match in the future. If they married each other, however, it could strengthen cooperation between the two families, killing two birds with one stone. The Chan family agreed without hesitation. After all, he was merely an illegitimate son, and one whose reputation was already beyond saving. It made little difference. President Sue and Mrs. Sue, however, hesitated. The moment Rosie heard she was to be married to that young master, she vehemently refused. She had been their cherished daughter for over 20 years. They couldn't bring themselves to agree immediately and said they needed time to consider. That hesitation caused disaster. That very night, President Sue was rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment. Terrified that he might truly marry her off to that scoundrel, Rosie poisoned him. He was sent straight into the ICU. Rosie's reckless move completely exhausted whatever affection Mrs. Sue still held for her. Ignoring Rosie's hysterical crying, Mrs. Sue immediately called the police and had her arrested. Rosie was charged with attempted murder. With the Sue family's influence at play, Rosie was sentenced to 10 years in prison. When Jane told me the news, I was puzzled. My face twisted into a tight knot of disgust. Once Rosie was behind bars, Jane also sent the nanny and the nanny's sister, the ones who had maliciously switched the babies years ago, straight to the police. In the end, the nanny received 15 years for child trafficking. Her sister received 20 years for child trafficking and child abuse. Given their ages, even if they survived prison, they would likely spend the rest of their lives scavenging scraps to survive. Around the same time, I received word about Ambrose. He had been dumped by the heiress and fired from his company for taking kickbacks. Destitute and desperate, someone approached him claiming they could help him start a business. Grasping at straws, Ambrose followed them. I initially considered tracking his whereabouts, but when I heard he had gone to Myanmar with them, I decided it was none of my concern. With the matter finally settled, Jane invited me out for dinner to thank me. I owe today to you, Mr. Law. Without your support, even that Chan young master alone could have ruined me. I wouldn't have made it this far. I took a sip of coffee and replied, no need to thank me. To be honest, I used you to deal with Rosie. You have what you have today because you earned it. Jane smiled faintly. If it benefits both sides, being used isn't such a bad thing. Mr. Law, Sue Corporation has just secured a new project bid. Would you be interested in collaborating again? I accepted the folder she handed me. Of course.